Again, we want to welcome each of you here in our building this morning, and we are wanting to give welcome to those who are watching us live and to those who watch us later in the week, and all of you are important to us here at Northside. And I appreciate in Darren's prayer how he asked for rain, because it is exceedingly dry right now, and we do need rain, and I'm thankful for that. I know by now you understand that John chapter 14 is a chapter where Jesus is trying to encourage his apostles. It's been a rough evening. They have had a supper together, and in the midst of that supper, Jesus has revealed that one of you is going to betray me. And then he identifies the one to be Judas. And Judas gets up and leaves. That must be shocking to those apostles. And then they hear a conversation between Jesus and Peter. And Peter speaks that he would never, ever, ever walk away from Jesus, and that he would be one who would even die for Jesus. And Jesus will say, "But Peter, before the sun rises in the morning, you're going to deny me 3 times. That would have left them in shock. And in the midst of all that, Jesus had said, "I am going away, and where I'm going, you cannot come." And so they are, as we have said so many times, sad, and they're bewildered, and they're afraid, and they are worried, and they have what is called a troubled heart. And so all through chapter 14 and on into chapter 15, Jesus is addressing the troubled heart issue. And so that's why he talked about the need for them to trust. That's why he said, I'm going to go to my Father's house. That's where I'm going. And in my Father's house are many rooms. I'm going to make a room for you. I'll come back and I'll get you and take you there. And you can't get to the Father's house except through me. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And I and my Father are one. All these are designed to encourage these people with troubled hearts. He even in verses 13 and 14 will say this. And it's kind of interesting, he says this. You can ask anything of me. Seems to be like he's talking about when he's gone. You can ask anything of me in my name, and I will give it to you. I hadn't noticed how he said that before. You can ask anything of me in my name, I will give it to you. All that to try to cure a troubled heart. But it's beginning in verse 15. That he gives the greatest of all cures for a troubled heart. Only they're not going to understand it. He's going to start talking about, after I'm gone, the Father and I are going to send to you a comforter, an advocate. We're going to send to you the Spirit, the Holy Spirit we call it. And I know they don't have a clue what he's talking about. And you're probably thinking, well, he's talking about the Holy Spirit coming to 11 men. But it also applies to us. Do all of you understand it applies to us? And could all of you agree that we haven't talked about it very much? And one of the reasons we haven't talked about it very much is because we don't know very much about it. We're going to talk about it. It's going to take a lot of effort to try to figure out what to say about it. But we'll look at what Jesus says ultimately about it. But what he's talking about specifically in chapter 14, beginning in verse 15, is about 50 days from now, it'll be a Jewish holiday called Pentecost, And this gift, this counselor, is going to come up on all of you in power. It's only then they'll begin to sense what he's talking about. But those men 50 days later will also stand up and preach. And some of those people who listen will be slashed in their hearts or cut in their hearts, or they'll be so troubled because they're going to realize the one they had made such effort to kill really was God's son we were waiting for. And we killed him. And they're going to feel the weight of such guilt. The weight of such guilt. Now that's a heavy, heavy weight. Do all of you understand that? I talked to a person this last week. I thought something else was bothering him. And he said, no, that's not what's bothering me. It's the massive amount of guilt I feel for not recognizing this particular issue. And they are crying out, what can we do about the mess that we made? And the response is going to be, you're going to have to change your life. And it's a radical change. Now, he was talking to Jews, devout Jews. It's a radical change. It's a radical change for all of us. And you're going to have to get baptized so that your sin can be taken care of. And when you do that, you will receive, does everyone remember? The gift of the Holy Spirit. You're going to get the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is going to live and does live inside of all kingdom people. And we want to explore some of the things that means. But before you get there, I found it so interesting that Jesus will say three things to these apostles. Or he'll say the same thing 3 times. That seems to be a prerequisite for the Spirit to be able to activate in your life or work in your life. It says emphatically we receive it. Jesus said emphatically, you'll receive it. But he puts this qualifier on it, and I want you to look at the qualifier. It's loving Jesus. He's going to say, if you love me. And he's going to say it 3 times. And I'm a little troubled by that phrase. What does it mean to love Jesus? And how many times have I stood before all of you and I have said that yes, love may have some emotional feeling, but it's got to be far more than that. And I thought, how can I explain this? How can I make this work? And you may not like some of what I say, but all of you men in the audience, love your wives. Now, if you don't say it, okay? You love your wives. But do you get up every morning and do you bounce out of bed with a great big smile? And do you start singing a song that sounds something like, oh, how I love you, let me count the ways? Is that what all you men do? And if you do, you're weird, okay? That's not how this works. And nor do you, though some people think it's like this. Some people think that loving Jesus is this euphoria that I'm in all the time. And that every other word is, they seem to think you get out of bed every morning, you start singing, oh, how I love Jesus. That is not the emotion that you and I carry all the time. There is some emotional feeling to love. But that's so shallow. That's so shallow. There's more to it. And so I want you to look carefully at what Jesus says 3 times, beginning in verse 15. So Bert's going to put it up there. Now read it with me very carefully. If you love me, keep my commands. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. But you catch the first part of that? If you love me, keep my commandments. How many times have I said love is, in reality, a behavior? It's what you do. Now look at the next verse. It's verse 21. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. And the Father, and the one who loves me will be loved by the Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them. And now verse 23. Jesus replied, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Now what does it mean? We will come to them and make our home with them. He's talking about, this whole context is the Spirit. The Father, the Son, the Spirit. The God who is, the God who came, the God who stayed. We will come and live inside of you. The Spirit will come and live inside of you if you love me and obey my teaching. How do you love Jesus? How do you show your love for Jesus? By obeying what he taught. But that's a problem. Because what are his commands? I have wrestled with that phrase for years. What are his commands? In the Old Testament, if you would have said this, they would have said, well, start with the 10 Commandments. And they would have said, on the top of the 10 Commandments, let me give you 585 more, or 752 more, or whatever they could think of. They just had command after command after command. But what are they in the New Testament? What are the commands for kingdom people? And over the years, I've come back over and over again to Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. That sermon that Jesus preached. It would do us a lot of good, all of us, to read that for ourselves once in a while. Once a week or once a month or something like that, just to read it. And I'm not going to read it to you this morning, but I'm going to remind you of how Jesus talks. And I'm going to talk in what you might call a revised way. Because Jesus says, you've been taught all of your lives you shouldn't kill. But I'm going to tell you, you ought to be careful how you talk about people. You ought to be careful how you talk about people. And you ought not to be calling people names. You know how we do that, don't you? You know how easy it is for me to say stupid or idiot or some word like that? I don't want you calling people names. And you've been taught forever, and it's correct. You should not commit adultery. You shouldn't have this sexual immorality. But I want to tell you that you ought not even to lust. Because if you never lust, you'll never commit the immorality. And you've been taught to give oaths to verify the truthfulness of your speech. So you swear by this and you swear by that. And I'm going to tell you, you don't need to do any of that. I want to tell you to have such integrity of your speech that you say yes and you say no, and that's good enough. People will know it. And you've heard it, it's been taught like this for a long time. Love your neighbor and go ahead and hate your enemy. But I'm going to tell you, I want you to try to love your enemy. And the way that works is not by feeling, but pray for them. Pray for them. Those people who are despitefully using you and they're saying bad things about you and they're criticizing you and they're persecuting you, pray for them. And try to do something good for them. And as you're living your life, and you're doing good things, you're giving some money away, or you're saying your daily prayers in some fashion, don't do it to show people. Don't do it, as we used to say, to show off. You know how some people would do that, don't you? In high school, they'd be a little taller, and so they might be able to dunk the ball. All the rest of us looking and thinking, wow. And they just keep doing it to show off and show off and show off, and to the point they start calling them show-offs. Don't do it like that. You do it quietly. You do it secretly. It's nobody else's business. It's about who you are. And by the way, and the way the world works is everybody is so busy laying up for themselves treasures on this earth, and they're trying to accumulate more and more of everything. And what you need to understand about treasures on this earth is they can go away. Rust can take them away, and thieves can take them away, and sickness can take it away, though he doesn't say that, I'm adding that. So what you ought to do is lay up more of yourselves treasures in heaven, and I promise you nothing can ever take it away. So what I'm telling you is to seek first the kingdom of heaven. And by the way, he says, quit being so judgmental. Quit judging people so harshly. Because you've got enough stuff of your own. If you take a look at yourself first, what are the commandments of Jesus? What are the commandments of Jesus? Have I not just spoken them? Have I not just laid them out in everyday terms? And I've left out a few? How many times have I said before us, let's just be kingdom people? The call is to be kingdom people. And Jesus seems to be saying, if you love me, that's what you'll do. You'll try to live like I told you to live. You'll try to keep my commandments. If you love me and you're trying to keep my commandments, you're trying to live like I tell you to live, and you're in my kingdom, I'm going to send to you, I'm going to put inside of you an advocate, a counselor, a teacher. My Father and I are going to come to live inside of you. The Spirit will be inside of you. Is that making sense to any of you? And I'm realizing it's more powerful than you think. Can I tell you something? I know I have God's Spirit. When I was baptized, I received God's Spirit. I ignored it for a long time. But right now, every single day, I pray that God will give me the measure of His Spirit that He knows that I need to do the job to which I have been assigned by Him. Not more and not less. And I get that from the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, no one had the Spirit of God except that God gave it to them temporarily for the moment. And so Samson had the long hair, but it indicates, as you read the stories of Samson, he's not strong all the time, because it said the Spirit of the Lord would come upon him and he would take the jawbone of a donkey and he would kill all these people. Or he'd break down the gates to a city because God put His Spirit upon him. And now, even before I speak, anywhere I speak, or I'm in a one-on-one conversation at times, I will say, by your Spirit, will you tell me what I need to know and what I need to say? But you know what? That's not going to work. None of that's going to work unless I, along the way, love Jesus. And the way you love Jesus is not by singing a song. It's by doing what He called us to do as kingdom people, to live according to His ways, to be like Him. Those are the commandments I see and understand. And so we take our communion simply to remember. Maybe simply is not the right word. To powerfully remember the Jesus who came and who had that last night with the apostles, and in just a few hours who will go to a cross, so that we too might have that Spirit, and we too might be a saved, set apart, special people. And I know what I'm telling you this morning is hard, because everything in this world is ugly and getting uglier. And here we are living as kingdom people because He did what He did.